Good morning, folks. This is Duncan, free as an eagle. I'm back. It's been a little while. I took a little time off for medical reasons and to process what I've been studying and learning since the last time that I put something up. And today I'm going to attempt to take on a couple of pretty tricky subjects that I've been thinking about and getting some insights on. So, the gist of my studies to this point have mostly been about NDEs and the consequences of people having had near-death experiences, how it changed their lives, and as a non-NDE person myself, how the study of the subject has changed my views in life, which it really has in a lot of ways. And so this is sort of a continuation of what I've been discussing up to this point. Um, so today's subjects, basically, I'm coming to this place of wanting to know the truth about things in general, and I'm going to attempt to see if it's possible to reconcile religions and NDEs because there's very different takes on these things. There's a lot of staunch, hardcore religious people, and my view is that most people that get into churches and religions are seekers uh, that want to know the truth, and this seems like a realistic path to take based on the information that's available through religions and churches. So most of these people are, some were born into the church, or it's the major religion in their country, or whatever. So everybody enters the religious sphere if they're going to with a religion of some sort, or even a cult, some type of philosophy, something to run with. And then people that have had near-death experiences come back with startlingly similar stories of what they've seen on the other side. So as a student of near-death experiences, I found it absolutely fascinating to hear similar stories from people from every possible walk of life, from different countries, coming back with very consistent testimonies of what they've seen on the other side. So I find that to be more consistent and more believable because it's firsthand experiences from normal people that couldn't make this stuff up, honestly. And as a result, I'm finding that overrides a lot of what I see as hand-me-down. I mean, not to insult religions, but I mean, most of the material that religions are based on is ancient scripts and things that were modified or changed or arranged by people, men mostly, over the years, that have had reasons to slant things. And so therefore what's coming from the churches in general, some of it is more pure than others. There's a lot of views, religious based views, that I will touch on some of. So one of the things is that a lot of what people report coming back from near death experiences involves seeing angels, spirit guides, even Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, various religious figures. So they lend some validity to the idea that most of these religions have some basis in a form of spiritual reality. And these people that are basically considered by NDE people to be ascended masters, basically people that have been in this whole circuit for a long enough time to have evolved. And consistent with most of the NDEers and a lot of Eastern religions, especially, Western Christianity didn't really embrace this, even though it is in the Bible in places, is this idea of reincarnation and our evolution spiritually over, in some cases, people have reported having lived thousands of lives, and in each one they're playing out various things they need to learn, and in some cases arranging ahead of time what they're going to learn in a given life. And then when they come to Earth, or Earth School, as many of them reference it, they come here to learn specific things. They interact with a certain set of people, many of whom they'll interact with in more than one life. And as a result, we're all growing this together. So there's some common elements as far as the belief that we're all one. And for me, like, this whole idea of attempting to reconcile death experiences and religions is the idea that if we're all one and in a collective, then we're all very similar. And I think I might have to struggle with this a little. I'm trying to cover a lot of material here. It's going to take some work, but So one of the reasons that there's different religions in this world, obviously people, have been seeking for thousands of years and born in different parts of the planet and exposed to different teachings and different histories, different religions. Um, One of the interesting things that near-death experiencers have reported is the idea that when they come back here to live a new life, they agree to forget what they knew while they're here. So this can be a fresh experience and it won't be influenced by past memories, that sort of thing. So the other thing is the idea that we're all connected ultimately on the other side. There's love, there's bliss, and there's this talk of vibration, like a higher vibration is associated with the higher states of mind and spirit as far as joy and peace and love and all of this good stuff. And then considered the lower end of the spectrum, low vibe things involve fear and hate and a whole spectrum of negative things. And one of the hugest revelations I think there is, and it's been kind of coming to me lately more and more, is that when we're here, I mean, on the other side, there's only the positive spectrum of things. When we're in a human body on this earth and we're separated from God and from each other essentially and come into the world not knowing what we're coming into and we've forgotten everything, there's a terrific amount of fear. And there's basically two paradigms that govern the universe as far as love is a creative energy, a creative force that is trustworthy, truthful, loving, supportive, forgiving, non-judgmental. And this love basically is the source of everything good and positive and constructive that would lead and guide people to want to do what we consider to be good. Uh, Fear is considered to be the progenitor, the basic source of everything negative. And I've been thinking a lot about this. Fear is the thing that comes with separation. We arrive on this planet, we see that there's a lot of uh, negative things going on, a lot of wars, a lot of famine, starvation, and natural disasters, and all these things. And the fact we're separated from the source of peace and comfort and love and security, it's a rough place to be. And we're forced to learn to cope with the way things are here. But the fear is basically a source of division. And so on the love side of things, there's this goal of unity. I mean, people have come back from the other side and said, yeah, on the other side, you realize we're all one. And that includes all other humans, animals, nature, plants, trees, everything. Like we're all connected. We're all basically manifestations of God, the creator. And they don't always use the word God because people have gone over to the other side. They were hardcore atheists, people from every religion, every walk of life, people that hated God, people that blamed God for their problems, and as well as, very fervent, devout religious people. So everyone going over there is unexpected, or they don't expect the amazing uh, force of love they encounter, which accepts them unconditionally, doesn't hold anything against them. And they find out quickly there's no death. All the communication is telepathic, it's instant. There's no time. There's no sense of, the past, present, and future are all basically one, and they're all accessible in different ways. So it's a completely different world. Everything is energy and light. Beings are energy and light, and they appear in different ways. Uh, so people will be recognized as being human or aliens or various, you'll see animals, people see their pets and what have you. So, but everything's in the form of energy and light. There's no mass, there's no matter. Things can travel fantastic speeds. They're not hindered by any of the physical laws that govern matter and mass and such. So when people come back and testify to what they've gone through on the other side, they may have seen other worlds and realms, met up with uh, past dead relatives, and very often there's some kind of banquet or celebration on going to the other side and going back and seeing everybody. That's considered home. This is sort of the away planet. I'm alluding to Star Trek because I grew up on Star Trek, and it's fascinating. There's a lot of things that are similar to that. I think Gene Roddenberry probably knew a certain amount about the NDE thing because a lot of those things are sort of based on what is known. There's also the technology. There's a lot of advanced technology, and when people go over to the other side, they see things kind of in terms of what they understand and already know. So they'll see buildings, figures, things that are familiar and understandable to them. It's not nebulous. I think part of that's an accommodation because uh, of the fact that we're going over there and we're not prepared for what, if we see things that are familiar, we'll understand them. So I've touched on the love-hate paradigm. So that's a major factor in terms of living an earthly life. People competing for resources, some people looking for power and greed. There's a lot of forces at work. There's good people, there's bad people. It's a mixture. We have hate and love operating here. On the other side, it's all on the love side. So people are here to learn lessons, but when you're born into a rough planet, there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of lack, and it helps to understand what motivates people when we come over here and we're separated and we're competing for resources, and it's easy for people to take up a kind of a zero-sum game mentality when they feel like, well, if somebody else gets something I don't, if they win, I lose. There's only so many resources to go around. And then religion. Okay, so here's the flip side thing, that the other half of the equation of what I want to discuss today is simply that religion can take the form of love-based religion, which basically is what Jesus was attempting to preach. And there's a lot of religions that are based in fear, or even things like Christianity that started out as love-based religions, but because of fear, there became this kind of top-down authoritarian mindset where the church sought to control. And of course, as we know, there's a lot of people that seek to control. And I feel like the desire to control is sort of fear-based largely. I mean, it can be greed-based, and some people lust after power and control. Some of it's fear-based at a deep level. Like, people feel like if they're not in control, then they're vulnerable and things can happen to them. They can't call the shots. And, there's greed, there's people that want to amass things. And even those things like overeating and greed can be traced to fear, in a sense that if you've lived, say you had a past life and you were terribly poor or food insecure and starved or went through certain kinds of traumas, there's something in your spirit that's sort of trying to compensate for that. So a lot of people overeat because of food insecurity. Like, the fear of lack of food will make you want to hoard and amass things. People that amass large amounts of money, I mean, they might legitimately want to take on a large project, but a lot of times people amass more than they need simply out of the insecurity of feeling like maybe they won't have enough. So, and people overeat, get overweight because something in them is afraid that maybe there'll be a lack, and that you're compensating for the lack by overdoing a given thing. So most things, if one analyzes it, can be traced back to either fear or love as a motive. And the fear motive will cause violence, wars, people fighting over land, over resources, and fighting over belief systems. And somebody, I don't remember who said this, but it really kind of hit me the other day. We were talking, and somebody was saying, well, when we're confronted with, like, we've born into a religion, we've invested, many years, many hours, we've accepted it as the truth, and we've gone down the pike relying on a certain religion. Well, if somebody gets in your face and tells you their religion's the right one, yours is wrong, then inwardly you've got to process the idea that if they're right, then maybe they're exposing something that you don't want to accept. They're basically telling you that you've wasted a lot of your life. And there's cult survivors, many of whom have come out of cults, and there's a traumatic recovery process, because if you've been duped by a cult and been in it for years, you come out of it, and now you look at your life unravel, and you realize you've wasted a terrific amount of time caught up in a belief system that was false. And now what do? You're just watching this burn, and now you've got to try to find out what the actual truth is. And as many know, I've been involved in the SBTV movement, which is basically an anti-Scientology movement, but anti-cult in general. And if you examine Scientology, the founder of that, L. Ron Hubbard, was a science fiction writer, and he falsified a lot of his credentials and took on a phony military persona with the Navy, and drew a lot of people into a belief system through the book Dianetics. And he had made up all this stuff, and basically had said before he did that, if you want to get rich, start a religion. Well, he started a religion. He was a brilliant guy. I won't fault him for that. He was brilliant. He sucked thousands and thousands of people into this cult that grew into this multi-billion-dollar cult that drew in a lot of people. And now there's a large movement of people that really want to see it exposed and taken down. And I was involved in a Christian religious sect that went off track, and I knew something was wrong. My wife and I got out of it after a number of years, realizing that there was something wrong. It was hard to put your finger on. I didn't have the understanding at the time to know what was wrong, but sometimes your gut just tells you something's wrong. You're not happy, you're depressed, you're just not finding it to be a benefit to you. And a lot of cults isolate their members, convince them they're the only ones that have the truth, and that you have to follow them and obey them. And they set up these authoritarian type structures that ultimately just restrict your movement. And one of the biggest things I've learned since coming out of that cult type thing is that it was basically fear-based. Fear that other people, that the world's going to end, that there's all this terrible stuff going on, most of which isn't true. And even if it were, people coming back from near-death experiences testify very frequently that we are sovereigns in a sense. And Jesus himself said, he quoted Psalm 82:6, I think it is, where he said, when he was being accused by the Pharisees and people of claiming to be God and everything, and he quoted a scripture that said, ye are gods, like you are gods, and as applying to us, and not even necessarily Christians. He was talking to people. Back in the day of Jesus, there weren't Christians. That wasn't a thing yet. There wasn't a Christian church. None of this existed. He was a guy that had been wandering in the wilderness and studying different religions, and he came forward with a religious belief based on what he knew. And one can argue a lot about that. I'll just say this much: he had the power of an ascended master. Many people would refer to him as an ascended master, and he told his disciples, you'll do greater things than I'm doing now, and you are basically gods in training. You're learning, you're finding out who and what you are and what you're capable of. But he was big on free will, and people come back from the other side and they testify that free will is a major component. They're not forced. I mean, they're very often they come back because their time isn't come yet to stay on the other side, or even though they'd rather stay there because it's far more pleasant and it's beautiful and loving and blissful and everything is great there. But they'll see the people that they left behind, and when they do, they'll be like, oh my God, I can't abandon my kids. I can't not go back and take care of the people that need me. I've been shown something terrific and given wisdom that is needed there. I'll go back and I'll use it to help people there. So many people have come back from near-death experiences on a voluntary basis and given the choice. And Jesus himself said, and I'll quote a few scriptures here that apply, because I feel like there is a crossover, there is commonality between what Jesus said and did, what other religious figures said and did, and what people from near-death experiences actually testify as true. So to me, where those two things merge, where they cross, where you find religious things that are consistent with a near-death experience thing, this is kind of where I'm finding the gold that I can rely on. Really, it's changed me. Like, I do believe, we do live forever. There's no death. If we cycle back here or go through multiple lives, that's so be it. We have eternity to deal with it. And I never could really quite settle with the idea that we're going to die and then go there and that's it. And we're going to rest forever. Well, I get bored. If I lay in bed, I can enjoy a good nap or a night's sleep, but I don't want to lay around for eternity. That's boring. But fortunately, there's much more to do. If we have multiple lives, there's things we can do on the other side. Once we're there to stay, there's a million options. There's a million things to learn. There's places to go and things to do. This is not it. There's nobody that's come back from a near-death experience that says, yeah, that's it. When you die, that's it. You're just put in a pine box. They put you in the ground and your history and you're forgotten. That's not the way it is. We live forever. We're souls and spirits. The body is a temporary vehicle we're in when we're here. So based on that, that's great news. And I'm losing my train of thought really quickly. I'm going to just pause this for a second so I can get my thing. Okay, I'm back. I had a brief brain lapse there. I forgot where I was going and needed to collect my thoughts. So one of the things that really helps explain why religion in many cases has gone off track. Jesus himself said, and I'll quote this scripture. Um, so in Matthew 18, Jesus said to his disciples, the great men of the Gentiles lorded over, the rulers of the Gentiles lorded over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. It shall not be so among you, but whoever would be greatest among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you will be the slave of all. So what that tells me is the church was never meant to be a top-down authoritarian structure. God himself values and respects free will. He had free will. He created us in his own image. So literally, the scripture says we are God's is saying that we basically have been given sovereignty, and that we actually, the angels are there to serve us. Honestly, there are angels on the other side that are aware of what we're doing and protect us. There's spirit guides assigned to us, and we have been given godlike privileges, and we've been created as souls and spirits. So we're entities, even though we're all connected and joined ultimately, and we're manifestations of God. We're part of what's considered to be the creation, and as a result, we're evolving and changing and learning and experiencing things, which is beautiful. And it's given me a huge amount of peace and a feeling of security. Like, you know what? We're forever. We're part of something huge. We didn't create ourselves. We're here. We were created, but we were also given enormous power in the sense of being free will beings. So the crazy part is the church was never intended by Jesus or anybody else to be a top-down authoritarian structure where we're just micromanaged, told what to do. And that's why so many cults and religions have gone astray, is setting up these top-down structures and denying people the freedom to be who they are and be themselves. And Jesus himself said the kingdom of God is within you, because the Pharisees, they were looking for like a king to come back and take control. And, people misinterpreted what Jesus said to think he was going to come back as this king and just use power. And he's like, no, the kingdom isn't something that's going to be here or there, like a physical location or an entity. It's like, no, the kingdom of God is within you. So the amazing thing is, a lot of people meditate and, do things like that and study. And I find like you can pray or talk to God or ask God for things. You've actually got to take some time to listen and kind of quiet yourself down to receive insights into things. And through the study of the near-death experiences, I've been experiencing this more and more. There's certain things that actually help in this. Like for me, everybody's got environments, things, places, activities that help kind of bring them into a state where they can receive, where they're not being bombarded. It's not loud. For me, it's being outdoors in nature. Nature is very therapeutic and healing, and being out in nature. Like most of the time lately, when I've gotten insights, it's been hiking. I love hiking up on mountains or any place. Something nice about getting out in the fresh air and being in the trees and in the woods and then looking off a mountain. It's just for me, that's a beautiful experience. Somebody might catch that, out in the ocean or riding a horse or fishing or whatever you're into doing. You got to find your happy place where you get inspired and recharged. Meditating. I mean, some people sit there and try to get super quiet and do the mantras and all this. And I'm not a very patient person in the sense I just want to lay there and listen, but sometimes I will. Like when you're falling asleep, you become very suggestible. Your mind becomes kind of open. A lot of times thoughts will come. Or for me, like if I hike up a mountain and I'm on the way down and I'm tired, I'll get floods of ideas and thoughts and insights into things. And I realize like, one of our goals or jobs in this life is to learn and evolve and grow. So to listen and learn and study are all things that aim in that direction. And knowing the truth is the best protection against being deceived. Like cults, people get sucked into cults, especially when they're young and during formative years, because they don't have much to draw from to know what's true and what isn't true. And when you've been duped by something like a cult or an off-base religion, it's hard to know where to go after that because you feel like a dummy. Like I've been deceived and tricked, and now what? How do I discern? How do I distinguish between what's true and what isn't true? And somehow the study of near-death experiences. I think for me, when I was young, I was a seeker. Back probably when I was in school, and I had an older brother that was mentally ill, and he struggled to make sense of life, and he had a lot of fear, and it just sort of threw this, like, I didn't grow up in this blissful state of everything's just super duper and hunky dory and life is great. I saw pain and suffering and things that made me question. Like, I almost took up psychology as a major. I didn't end up doing that, but I was always interested in it and did a lot of reading. And I remember Ray Moody's book about near death experiences coming out back in probably the 70s or 80s, and reading that. And I didn't quite grasp it. I was young enough then. It was all seemed like Star Trek. It seemed pretty trippy stuff, but I didn't really see it as true. Then a few years ago, I was watching a Netflix kind of documentary series on spiritual things, and I went into a lot of, crazy stuff. But I remember seeing this one kind of video documentary of this woman that had gone over. She was kayaking, going over falls and stuff, and ended up crashing and dying and leaving her body. And she just told this very vivid account of that. I'm like, man, this is something amazing. It was on Netflix. It was something like Life After Death or something like that. And then I started watching more and more YouTube videos, and I realized they're really a big thing right now, because I think we're actually entering a transformative time in history where more and more information is being revealed. And as technology increases and we're becoming more and more sophisticated, for some reason we're getting, and I mean, literally we're always in wars. The world's a topsy-turvy place right now. We've gone through COVID, and we've gone through climate change. We're going through a lot of major transitions that are rough, and it's a tough time to be alive. But on the other hand, we're being aided by angels and beings on the other side, and they're sharing more information with us. So I'm believing there's an awakening and a increasing consciousness underway now that's going to help us turn things around. So this paradigm, like right now, war and everything like that, I've really been searching, like, what are we supposed to do? If you're in a country and you're drafted, or you have a just reason to defend your country, how do you deal with that? We don't, most of us, I'm a peaceful type of person. I don't want to be at war, but if I have to, I want to have the courage to get out and fight. But yet I've always felt like, well, there's a better way, but I could never accept the idea that it's just being passive. Passivity isn't gonna, you'll get yourself killed. People will just lay down in front of people that are approaching them in war. It's just suicide. So I couldn't really work my way through that one. And I'm beginning to realize more and more, I think the ultimate weapon, the ultimate end, is when enough people realize that we are all connected. And even in the NDEs, people go over and have a life review, and they get to see how their life impacted other people's and what they did right or wrong. They're not being judged. It's for learning. So you're seeing your whole life review and seeing what you did to other people or for them. And it's very sad to me. It's like people see that and they're like, oh my God, you come back, you don't want to be, because you're doing what you're doing to others, you're ultimately doing to yourself. Like when Jesus gave out the golden rule and said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That is the simplest logic there is. And if we did that, if everyone did that, there would be no war, because we'd all see each other as brothers and sisters and people that we're connected to. So it would be crazy to do to others what we wouldn't want done to us, because in the end, we actually experience what we've done to others. So I feel terribly sorry for the Hitlers and the Putins and the people that have destroyed millions of lives and displaced people and killed them and caused pain and suffering, because those people will literally inherit those experiences, and they will pass through what they've done to others as an experience of their own, as if they were, were the victim of what they've done. And on the flip side, when people do good for others, they will enjoy the benefits of receiving what they've done to others. And that's the simplest possible religious philosophy I can come up with. So to me, that's the crossing over between religion and near-death experiences, is this realization we're all one, we're all connected. And ultimately, what we do to others, we're doing to ourselves. When enough people realize that's true, things will change, and change drastically. And to speak to that is also like religions that try to force things on people, thinking that somehow it's got to be forced. You can't force anyone to believe anything. So to me, it's like if your life demonstrates by your actions will reflect your belief system. So to me, is when you believe something, it's not like, Jesus didn't say like you have to believe this or that. No. If you believe Jesus, what he's saying, if you actually internalize it and believe it and accept it as truth, and based on like what he demonstrated through his life, then that will change you. It's not, you can't force yourself or anyone else to believe anyone. So through crusades and all these sort of hate and fear-based religious activities, trying to compel other people to conform to a religion to control them, it's all on a negative spectrum. It can't work. Like, even if you put a gun to somebody's head and you force them to agree to a certain belief system, they can't internalize that. That doesn't have any power to do anything good. That all it does is instill them with terrible fear, and they're just trying to stay alive. So a lot of people on this earth are trying to stay alive in various ways, and they're doing it on the basis of fear and all the things that arise from fear. Hate basically is fear of the unknown expressing itself, or fear of something you don't believe. You've been indoctrinated or convinced of something. The other guy's a threat to you because he believes something different. If his religion is right, maybe yours is wrong. He's a threat. So there's fear hiding behind almost every negative manifestation on the earth. And love is something that Jesus said was over. It's the only thing that can overpower hate. And I really see that because people that have enough love can get through. That's the only thing that can get through to somebody that's bound by hate. And I heard a story by a guy. This was a recent NDE experience type thing. A guy was telling the story of a woman there was a school shooter situation where a teenager had a gun and was going to unload it on people. And somehow this teacher had the love and the courage to step forward and just offer to befriend the kid, and didn't even ask to take the gun away. Basically just said she would look out for him and help him. And how could she help him? And then over time, he just surrendered the gun and allowed himself to be helped. And, he needed counseling, and who knows what kind of trauma the kid had gone through. And I can get it. If your kid was bullied a terrific amount in school, I saw it happen. I experienced it when I was a teenager, and you can build up a terrific amount of anger against your peer group or the people around you that aren't protecting you. And all this stuff's fear-based. And this kid was just wanting to lash out in general because he'd felt, like the world was a terrible and unjust place. He'd never really seen any real love. So in the end, the kid got helped, and didn't end up being a lethal shootout or anything else. So it's like even these kids that do terrible things and act out, deep down, they're scared, they're afraid, they're governed by fear. And love is probably it is, the only force that's capable of taking somebody out of that scenario and restoring them. And, when you feel secure, then you can let down and be yourself. And that's one of the big takeaways, from people from the NDE world, is coming back and saying, man, they were totally loved and accepted. They felt secure. And when we bring kids into the world, because I've got 3 kids myself, and when we brought them into the world, you're like, oh my God, you realize you're bringing them into a pretty scary world. But on the other hand, you don't want them to see or know that. You want them to experience a much better life. So you try to set things up so you protect and shield them from all the bad things. You want to create this comfortable, warm, secure little paradise where they get their needs met and everything. You love them. And then when they get a little older, at some point they're exposed to some reality. They can't always have everything they want immediately all the time. This is a rough learning environment. So it's like we want to create that perfect environment for little kids, and they get a little older, and then we're throwing them in school and putting them in sports and things that are not inherently bad, but they're coming into a tough place here. So anyway, to wind this up, I think the reconciliation between religion and NDEs is just realizing that indeed we are all connected. The more of us that are aware of that and actually internalize that as a truth, then the better we're going to treat each other, the better we'll treat the environment and take care of nature and whatever. And it won't be by force. It won't be compulsion. I'm just going to go into one more brief thing that occurred to me I wanted to present, and I hadn't gotten to this, but it's so the idea. Let's see. I'm going to have to pause again. I had the thought come into my head, and then Okay, I'm back again. Had another brief brain fart there where I lost track of the last thing I wanted to say here. It's actually extremely important that this is another thing that defines how religion can go off track, and why it has in so many cases is, so we're dealing with fear versus love, and love respects free will. Love is graciously given. It isn't exacting and demanding. And one of the reasons Jesus ran into trouble and got crucified is because the church system at the time, these people were very proud of the fact they were very religious, they were obeying the laws. And there's this term legalism we use in like church circles, but being under the law versus grace. Okay, so to me, the law is like obeying the Ten Commandments or obeying, a set of rules. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the clerics or whatever of Jesus' day were big on obeying the letter of the law. So you've got two ways to go here. The letter of the law is obeying rules and laws. And yet Jesus said that the law would be written in people's hearts. So the whole idea and the idea of the kingdom of God is within you. So people that are intrinsically motivated to do good do not need the external law. The Bible says somewhere that the law is for the lawless man. So the lawless man that doesn't know God, or, I'm using the word God, and a lot of NDE people won't. They'll just say source or whatever. But to me, I've grown up calling God God. Actually, God is, Jesus, kind of, we're all one. We're all connected. So in the end, we're all part of the whole that includes Jesus and includes other ascended masters and religious leaders that were on the right track, et cetera, et cetera. So, so what Jesus was basically trying to say was, when you get it, when you understand, when you realize we're all connected, when you know what love is, then you will express that love by doing good to one another. There's another scripture that says, love does no harm to a neighbor. So, in other words, when you're enlightened with the truth of that fact we're all connected and you know what love is, then you'll want to do what's good for everybody. And I've tried to kind of nurture that philosophy, is like to do good for everybody, because it's like a rising tide raises all boats. It's like we're all connected. So if we help somebody else, not only is it a karma thing that might come back to help us, but we're all connected. So if you do good for somebody else, ultimately you're benefiting yourself. So that's sort of simple. So here's the thing, like religion, when it goes off track and it becomes control based and top down authoritarianism, then what happens is this very extreme emphasis on the law, basically, the religious doctrines and texts. I mean, I know a lot of people, and I know there's sincere people that mean well and they believe, but they don't know, they don't understand. I think Jesus talked about them when he said, well, there's people that have a form of religion, but they're denying the power of it. What they don't realize is that the form of religion they have is outward, it's legalistic, and it's all about enforcing laws, the letter of the law, because they don't get the idea that if you really are changed inside, then you will naturally want to do what's right. So you don't need, like, in other words, if Jesus said if the law is written on your hearts, you won't need an external enforcement. You don't need this authoritarian system pounding it into you and demanding, like, I mean, cults, a lot of them are very micromanagement oriented, people that are micromanaging the people under them, telling them what to do and what not to do, surveilling them. Like, Scientology, for example, I mean, recording everything, cameras and recordings, and, what they call auditing, which is sort of like interrogating people, trying to dig. And I was in a Christian cult like environment where there was a lot of emphasis on like trying to purify yourself, purify your heart, digging out all the dirt. Well, the problem is somehow that never was achievable. There was always more. And trying to perfect yourself or purify yourself ended up being completely futile, because that's an attempt almost to like force yourself to obey the law and route out, rather than putting in the good. You can just go so far by routing out, trying to route out the bad, because the problem is if you're only focused on routing out bad, you're focused on the bad. You're not focused on doing good. So you're better off helping somebody, volunteering your time to help somebody, because that's building the good, or getting out in nature, or just doing something positive. This navel gazing, as we called it, staring at your navel, it's like looking inside and trying to route out evil. It's a negative emphasis, and it's just a downward spiral. It's a hole that you go into, like a rabbit hole you won't come out of. So that was a kind of fear-based, afraid of judgment. Like if you're spending your time afraid of judgment and trying to avoid judgment, then you're in fear. That's not positive. That doesn't love. That doesn't do anybody any good. But love, being that it's forgiving and long suffering. I mean, 1 Corinthians 13, I think it is, it's a love chapter in the Bible. It tells a terrific amount about what love actually is. It's long suffering and patient, kind, and keeps no record of wrong. So people overlook that. To me, that's one of the most telling things there is in the Bible. love keeps no record of wrongs. Okay, so is God keeping a record of wrongs? Well, if love doesn't keep a record of wrongs, then why are we so afraid of God? Like when people go for the life review, then they're seeing this in a non-judgmental, and they're so shocked. They're like, oh my God, I wasn't even being judged. I was just seeing my life and learning from the experience, and like, wow, and if you felt remorse over something bad you did, you were judging yourself. So that's another emphasis in the whole evolution of our souls, is we're manifesting who we are supposed to be or can be or want to be. And most of the judgment we go through, if not all of it, is basically we're judging ourselves. We're seeing how our lives impact other people. We're judging our own behavior and thoughts and trying to rise higher and get out, and even me trying to find patterns. Like I've seen a lot of patterns where a lot of my past life was governed by fear and insecurity and all these things. And it's so freeing to realize that those are all things that you're not going to be held, in contempt for or punished for. God's not about punishing, because if love is long suffering and patient and keeps no record of wrongs, then we've been duped into thinking that we're going to come under this harsh, fear-producing judgment, and then we're more concerned about avoiding judgment than we are about doing good. That's a completely false backwards emphasis. So that's a huge thing. When you see a religious organization or a church that's emphasizing legalism and enforcement of the law and enforcement of religious doctrines and codes, that's slavery. That's slavery to the law. That's legalism. It isn't grace. It isn't freedom. So to me, that's the other big takeaway is the idea that ultimately God did not want us to be slaves to the law, and that if we have freedom, we'll want to do what's right, because if we don't, we're going to go lower in the scheme of things. If we want to do what's right and be motivated by love, that's what we're going to seek, and we're going to do good. And as you do more good, you're going to be a happier person and be freer and freer of all this stuff. So sharing the good news of the actual reality that love is the way to go, and understanding the mechanics of it a little bit, has been very helpful to me, because I'm analytical. I don't want to know, I don't want a formula to plug numbers into or to just follow. I want to understand the why of it. If I understand the why and the how of it, then I'll feel better equipped. So the whole NDE study for me has just been equipping me to think clearly and say, wow, what really does matter, and what are my motives leading toward. So it's very freeing to hear all these stories that define love in a more clear way, and allow me, based on that, to now look at religion and say, man, there's good in it, there's bad in it, there's truth in it, there's untruth in it, because it's been largely distorted and created by man in many cases, or warped by man. And it all boils down to is, are you coming from a place of fear in your religion, and you're worried about coming under judgment, failing God or failing yourself or failing other people? Are you trying to obey laws and rules? If you are, you're still in the Old Testament someplace. You're still not free. If you believe that you're not going to be judged, but that you're being forgiven and loved, and that you can overcome all this stuff, then you're no longer in fear. And if you're not in fear, like Paul said somewhere, happy is the man whose heart doesn't condemn him in what he approves. So how do you get free of things that condemn you? It isn't by obeying the law. It's by seeking the truth and seeking to move in love, but knowing you have that security of being accepted already. You're not going to be thrown in hell. You're not going to be judged and cast out because of some sin you committed. God's bigger than that, and his love is sufficient to overpower all that stuff and keep pulling you closer in. When you realize you're moving in love and you're all connected, then this thing naturally happens. So anyway, I'll just finish by saying, so I'm not there yet, but I'm getting a grip on this. I'm understanding more of it. And I'm seeing how in my own life there's been so much distortion and, untruth that I've been tripping over for a long time. And now, the puzzle pieces are clicking into place. The sky is clearing. It's getting better. So, I mean, this is an upward process of growth and learning. And I've even asked God in the past, without even understanding what I was saying, I want to, don't let me out of this life. Don't let me die without accomplishing what I'm here for. And I really feel like understanding things that seemed unattainable is sort of the purpose. Like, I don't want to leave this earth without being in a better state than when I got here. So, and I feel like I'm in the process of doing that. And of course, being that that's the case, I feel like I do want to share it, not just for the sake of, sharing it, but to see other people be happier and maybe find a way out of their own issues. So it's like, yeah, I hope this information benefits you. And as I keep moving forward and evolving and learning more, then I'll record more, and hopefully somebody will benefit from hearing this, and it'll stimulate a little bit of thought. But until next time, have a great day, and take care.